My employer paid me for 40 hours a week and expected 60. This was not a secret arrangement. It was simply the culture, the unspoken contract that nobody had signed but everybody understood. You arrived early, you stayed late, you answered emails on Sunday evenings, and in return you were considered a team player, a safe pair of hands, someone with a future at the company. I had been doing this for 3 years when I finally sat down and calculated what my actual hourly rate worked out to be. It was £9.63. I was a senior project coordinator. My advertised salary had seemed reasonable when I accepted the role. It still looked reasonable on paper. What it didn't account for was the 20 extra hours a week I was quietly donating to a company that had, in the previous financial year, posted a profit of £14 million, £9.63 an hour. I went home that evening and looked at the number for a long time. The following morning I arrived at 9 o'clock, not 8:15, which was when I'd been arriving. 9 o'clock, as stated in my contract. I took my full lunch break. I left at 5:30, as stated in my contract. I did not check my emails that evening. My manager noticed by Wednesday. He called me into his office and asked if everything was all right. I told him everything was fine. He said he'd noticed I'd been leaving at 5:30 this week. I confirmed that I had. He said the team needed to pull together on the current project. I said I was giving the project everything my contracted hours allowed. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said he hoped I wasn't losing my commitment. I told him my commitment was exactly what it had always been, 40 hours a week, as agreed. The next 2 weeks were uncomfortable in the way that doing nothing wrong can sometimes be deeply uncomfortable. Nobody said anything directly, but the atmosphere shifted. I was left off a meeting invitation that I should have been included in. My manager stopped asking my opinion in team discussions. A colleague told me, quietly and with genuine kindness, that people were talking about my attitude. I documented all of it. Every omission, every change in treatment, every comment that found its way back to me. I kept a contemporaneous log with dates and times, the way I'd learned from a case I'd read about online where someone had done exactly what I was doing and had needed exactly that kind of evidence. I also did some reading. What I found was that what my employer had been doing, creating a workplace culture where excessive unpaid overtime was effectively mandatory, enforced through social pressure and implied consequences for non-compliance, sat in an interesting legal grey area around working time regulations and constructive pressure. Not cut and dried, but interesting. I contacted ACAS on a Thursday afternoon. The advisor I spoke to was measured and factual. She walked me through the Working Time Regulations 1998, the right to disconnect, and the concept of constructive dismissal if treatment deteriorated sufficiently following my decision to work my contracted hours. I thanked her and made notes. Then I went back to my desk and continued doing my job, thoroughly, professionally, and in exactly 40 hours per week. The formal conversation happened 5 weeks after I'd started leaving at 5:30. My manager sat across from me with an HR representative I hadn't met before. He said there were concerns about my performance and engagement. He said several project milestones had been missed. I asked him to specify which milestones and to show me documentation of the targets I'd been set and failed to meet. He couldn't, because the missed milestones were tasks that had previously been completed in the unpaid hours I'd stopped working. They weren't in my job description. They'd never been formally assigned to me. They'd simply been absorbed into the invisible overtime that everyone was expected to donate. I placed my documentation on the table. 6 weeks of a contemporaneous log, a note from my ACS conversation, a copy of my contract with my actual hours highlighted. I said I wanted to discuss the changes in my treatment since I began working my contracted hours. The HR representative looked at my manager. My manager looked at the documentation. The meeting ended shortly after that. 2 days later, I received a written confirmation that my role had been reviewed and my responsibilities formally realigned to reflect my contracted position. 3 months after that, I received a salary increase, 12%, unsolicited. I still leave at 5:30. I still take my full lunch break. I no longer check emails on Sunday evenings and nobody has mentioned my commitment since. The £9.63 is now £14.22. It turns out that knowing your rights and being willing to use them quietly and precisely is more effective than any confrontation could have been. Has a workplace ever expected something from you that wasn't in your contract? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more complete stories with no part twos that never come, follow the page. New story every day.